It's been just over a month since protests, rioting, and destruction rocked the city of Albany right to its foundation. The shocking death of George Floyd at the knee of a Minneapolis police officer blew wide open the long simmering disconnect between the African American community and law enforcement. Tonight, Albany Police Chief Eric Hawkins talks to me about the challenges that he personally faces as a member of both of those communities and what he thinks it's going to take to heal the rift.
No justice! No peace! No justice! No peace!
There's expectations, I think, that I feel, a pressure that I feel sometimes to correct all of the wrongs and all of the injustices overnight.
Albany Police Chief Eric Hawkins admitting as a black police leader, he never felt that pressure more than during the recent violent protests over the death of George Floyd. He wanted the protesters in Albany to understand that he had committed his entire professional life to making it possible for others to follow in his footsteps, and yet...
When I looked into their eyes, I did not see inspiration. I saw disappointment. I saw anger. I saw, in some, almost hate. And it hurt to see that.
For Albany's police chief, somehow blending the expectations of the community members who feel they've been badly shortchanged and his officers who feel like they're under siege is his greatest challenge.
I have officers who are afraid right now. They are afraid of being the poster child for everything that's wrong in police work if they make an honest mistake.
Although growing up, he had few interactions with police himself, like other young black men, he was given the talk.
My dad would always tell me back then that I had to be careful around the police. Told me to make sure that I wasn't a threat.
Hawkins' childhood world revolved around the factories that were synonymous with Pontiac, Michigan, where his father worked.
Did you grow up respecting the police?
Not necessarily, because everybody that I was around, at least in the neighborhood I grew up in, and a lot of my friends and relatives as an occupying force, seen as people who oppressed black people. They were dangerous.
Sadly, all these years later, Hawkins admits young black children still have those negative feelings toward police.
That's what's so frustrating for me now. But you would think that I would have had a very good appreciation for the depth of this anger and frustration that the African American community has with law enforcement. And it was startling to me as I progressed into my law enforcement career exactly how widespread and how deep it was.
He tells the story of his own 30-year-old son, Ethan.
You won't find anybody more sympathetic to the police cause than my son.
And yet he recounts a phone call from Ethan concerned about an interaction with police.
Dad, how do I file a complaint against a white police officer who treated me differently? And I think it was because I'm black. That's when it really struck me that, this really is deep. And that's when it really hit me that, there's work to be done.
Because of a career that's been bookended by Rodney King and civil unrest and the 2020 murder of George Floyd, Eric Hawkins says his personal mission has changed. He learned in law school that
reasonable minds can differ.
And where he once thought that he could change the world, his goal as chief now is simply to get people on both sides to have honest and open conversations.
I see my role as being that now, more so than being this agent of change, of where I wave a magic wand and make everything better.
The chief says he and others got into law enforcement to help people, to bring order out of chaos. And he says despite a tremendous amount of progress, they have to go back and listen and figure out what they're missing, what it is the African American community wants from its police department that they're not getting. It's been 9 years now since Ken Screven last appeared on our air as one of our most valued and trusted reporters. In his 34 years here, Ken witnessed many pivotal moments in our country, and now what he calls the public lynching of George Floyd. I talked to my friend and former colleague this week about the past, the present, and the future of Black lives in America.
Someone has given someone a memo that Black people are dispensable. As a man of color and as someone who believed in our country for so long, I'm very, very angry.
Ken Screven was a teenager when Black power burst into the American consciousness. His parents grew up in the Jim Crow South, and he remembers.
When I was a child in the early 60s and late 50s, when my parents and I were watching the news and seeing Black people in the South being attacked by dogs and fire hoses. And I remember saying to my mother and father, is that going to happen to us?
50 years later, he watches the image of a white police officer with his knee on the neck of George Floyd long after he stopped breathing, and of a young Black man shot to death as he jogged through a Georgia neighborhood.
Do you think that young men and women, young kids today are asking their parents that? Am I going to be shot?
Absolutely. I know it's happening. If I were a parent today, I would never let my child out on the street at night. I really wouldn't.
As a Black man on TV in Albany in the early 70s, Ken was a trailblazer with a conscience. He even profiled his own family history in the Deep South, where his great-grandfather had been a slave.
This is what we were looking for.
Oh, yeah, I'll be down with it. I'll come right to it.
This is my great-grandfather's grave. This is Cyrus Screven.
You sat at tables at editorial meetings with me, and I would bring things up at times. We need to do it this way. We have to do it that way. We have to change the way we look at people of color. What we just saw was one of the most difficult things I've ever had to witness.
A journalist of great compassion, he recognized the opportunity that gave him to bridge a wide divide, something he continues to do today on social media.
I have a large Facebook following, and they tell me I did not know it was this bad. But we sort of told you it was this bad. We've been telling you for a long time it's this bad.
He remembers what he said on the air the night Barack Obama was elected.
This election is a page-turner for American history. I broke away for 1 second and said, I wish my parents were alive to see this night. Well, here we are 12 years later, and I'm glad my parents are not alive to see what's going on, what has happened. This is not the country that they believed was going to be my future.
Ken does not condone the violent protests that have broken out around the nation and here at home, saying they dilute the message and alter the focus. But he points out,
people love Martin Luther King now, but when he was alive, most of white America did not. And he was treated very badly. So, he was a peaceful person. Then he was killed. Rioting, of course, is not something that I support. But sometimes America doesn't pay attention until you start yelling.
And he has a ready answer when asked for a solution.
Well, I say this all the time. People start to squirm a bit. But I think we need more white people to confront other white people when they see crap, when they see bad behavior, when they see hate, when they see racism. Don't sit there and say, it's okay. It's not normal.
Ken and I talked about another moment as well. Last weekend, Schenectady police holding hands with protesters as they marched together through the streets. He said the image meant a lot to him because it was not a part of the past that he remembered. He calls this a time of great challenge where we must ask ourselves, can we survive and move forward? Can we be the country we're supposed to be? The country that his parents said would be waiting for him. Just this week, Union College in Schenectady introduced a new on-campus initiative built around race, power, and privilege. The program was created by the school's first African-American president, Dr. David Harris. I spoke to him yesterday at length about his own personal experiences and the role that they have played in helping him to put together his vision for Union College.
I hear, get out of the car with your hands up.
Union College President Dr. David Harris recently wrote in an op-ed that even today, as president of one of the country's most prestigious colleges, he's still nervous every time he sees a police car in the rearview mirror.
And I thought, whoa. And the officers are in their cars yelling. I got out of the car and boom, they swarm, hands on guns. Where's the guns? Where's the drugs?
Harris says he was working as a driver for Enterprise Rent-A-Car in Santa Monica during a break from college 30 years ago when the police car pulled him over without apparent cause.
Frisking me hard, searching the car.
After what seemed like forever, the threat, but not the impact, evaporated.
All right, like, well, watch out in the future or something. And that was it. And that memory of doing nothing and having that kind of experience sticks with you. And especially because it's not unique.
Dr. Harris confronts today's images with concerns about whether they'll bring lasting change. George Floyd being held down by a policeman's knee, Rayshard Brooks being shot in the back, Eric Garner begging for air in a police chokehold.
My fear is that 10 years down the road or whatever, George Floyd will be to racial inequality and police violence what Sandy Hook is to gun violence. And you look back and we haven't done that much.
He doesn't condone the violence that's resulted, but he understands the simmering anger that has exploded. It has led to American icons literally being torn down because of their involvement with slavery. The president admitted to me this could be an issue at Union.
It's hard to believe that a school that started 225 years ago could have completely escaped these issues.
He remembers working for the Obama administration on the 150th anniversary of the start of the Civil War, sitting in the Eisenhower Executive Office building and seeing the leader of the Confederacy staring down at him.
Of all days, as an African-American working under an African-American president, 150 years after the Civil War began, I said, why is Jefferson Davis on the wall? He was Secretary of War. It was a painful moment once I got over the shock of, wait a minute, this guy led the Confederacy.
Easing painful moments at Union has led to the president's own new initiative, engaging students and staff on race, power, and privilege on a campus where minority students represent about a quarter of the population.
It's not enough to give people space to just speak. We have to figure out how we try to take the temperature down in intentional ways when nothing big has happened, so people can really understand where others are coming from.
For David Harris, fighting racism is like Sisyphus, the mythical king who was doomed for all eternity to push an enormous rock uphill.
Never got there. Will we?
I don't know, hopeful. There's so many issues in society, race, gender, others, where we make progress, we celebrate, we turn around. And after a while we look and we say, oh my goodness, the rock is right back where it was.
David Harris is a numbers man, and as a sociologist and demographer, he went right for the knockout when I asked him to talk about inequality, pointing out that the infant mortality rate, now that's the probability that you won't reach your 6th birthday, is more than twice as great for a black child than a white child.